The gun pressed against her son's temple. Vernon's arm locked around the boy's throat. "It is okay, Mama," Tommy whispered. "I am not afraid." Clara had run 500 miles to protect her children. Now the monster had found them. It would take a desperate mother, a wounded rancher, and a silent little girl to bring him down. This is their story. The bruise on Danny's temple had turned from purple to yellow, but Clara Whitmore knew some wounds never healed. She stood in the frozen darkness of their bedroom, watching her 5-year-old son sleep, his small chest rising and falling beneath the thin quilt. 3 nights ago, that bruise had been fresh. 3 nights ago, her husband Vernon had lifted their youngest child by the collar and thrown him against the wall like a sack of grain. The sound still echoed in Clara's mind, the dull thud of a small body hitting oak. The silence that followed, stretching for 2 heartbeats, 3, 4, then the crying. Thank God, the crying. It meant Danny was alive. Clara pressed her hand against her mouth to keep from sobbing. She was 32 years old, and she had spent 10 of those years learning to cry without making a sound. Vernon did not like noise. Vernon did not like complaints. Vernon did not like anything that reminded him his family was made of flesh and blood, rather than property to be arranged and rearranged at his pleasure. In the bed across the room, her daughter Lily lay curled against her older brother Tommy. Lily was 7, with hair the color of wheat and eyes that had once sparkled with mischief. Those eyes were empty now. They had been empty since the night Vernon hurt Danny. Lily had not spoken a single word in 3 days. Not one. Clara had tried everything: gentle questions, favorite songs, the promise of honey cake. Nothing. Lily simply stared, as if she had retreated to some place deep inside herself where no one could reach her. Tommy was 10. He slept with one arm around his sister and the other hand clutching a broken stick he had sharpened to a point. Even in sleep, he was ready to fight. Even in dreams, he was standing guard. Clara looked at her children and felt something shift inside her chest. It was not fear. She had lived with fear for so long, it had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. This was something else. Something harder and colder and more dangerous. This was decision. She moved silently through the house, gathering what she could carry. $23 hidden in her sewing box, clothes for the children, dried meat and hard biscuits from the pantry, 2 thin blankets that would not be nearly enough for the Montana winter, but were all she could take without Vernon noticing. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet, and she froze, listening. From the bedroom down the hall came the sound of Vernon snoring. He had drunk himself to sleep again, a bottle of whiskey, his only companion. He would not wake until morning. By then, Clara intended to be miles away. She paused at the kitchen table and wrote a note in her careful, practiced hand. Gone to visit mother in Nebraska. Back in a week. The lie tasted like ash in her mouth. Her mother had been dead for 5 years. Vernon did not know this because Vernon had never cared enough to ask. In 10 years of marriage, he had never once inquired about her family, her dreams, her fears. She was a housekeeper who warmed his bed. Nothing more. Clara tucked the note under the sugar bowl and went to wake her children. Tommy's eyes snapped open the moment she touched his shoulder. He was already reaching for his sharpened stick before he recognized her face. Mama. Quiet, baby, we are leaving. He did not ask where. He did not ask why. He simply nodded and began pulling on his clothes. 10 years old, and he understood. 10 years old, and he had learned that sometimes the only answer to violence was flight. Danny was harder to wake. His small body was warm with sleep, and he whimpered when Clara lifted him from the bed. The bruise on his temple seemed to glow in the moonlight, a reminder of everything she was running from. Shh, sweetheart. We are going on an adventure. Lily rose without being asked. She dressed herself in the darkness, her movements mechanical, her face blank. Clara watched her daughter and felt her heart crack along old fault lines. What had Vernon taken from this child? What piece of Lily's soul had shattered when she watched her father hurt her brother? Clara did not know. She only knew she would spend the rest of her life trying to put it back together. They crept out through the back door into a night so cold it burned. The wagon was already hitched to their old mule. Clara had done that yesterday, telling Vernon she needed to go to town for supplies. He had not cared enough to check whether she actually went. The children climbed into the wagon bed, burrowing under the blankets like rabbits seeking shelter. Clara took the reins and clicked her tongue. The mule began to walk. Behind them, the house grew smaller and smaller until it was swallowed by the darkness. Clara did not look back. There was nothing there worth seeing. Only 10 years of broken promises and broken bones and a broken woman who had finally found the strength to break free. They traveled north. Clara did not have a destination. She only knew that Vernon's reach extended south and east, where he had friends and business partners and men who owed him favors. North was unknown territory. North was danger and wilderness and the kind of cold that could kill. But north was also freedom. And freedom, Clara had learned, was worth any price. The first day passed in a blur of white. Snow fell steadily, covering their tracks almost as soon as they made them. Clara was grateful for this small mercy. Vernon would come looking. He always did. But the snow would buy them time. They stopped only to rest the mule and feed the children. Danny ate mechanically, his eyes glazed with exhaustion and pain. The bruise on his temple had swelled overnight, and Clara worried about what damage might be hidden beneath the skin. But there was nothing she could do. No doctor to consult. No medicine to administer. Only the road ahead and the desperate hope that it led somewhere safe. Lily did not eat at all. She sat in the wagon bed with her knees drawn to her chest, staring at nothing. Clara tried to coax her with biscuits and dried apples, but Lily turned her face away. "She will eat when she is ready," Tommy said quietly. "She did this once before, after he broke Mama's arm. She did not eat for 2 days, but she came back." Clara looked at her son and saw the weight of knowledge in his eyes. Tommy remembered things a 10-year-old should not remember. He had witnessed things no child should witness. And he had learned to cope in the only way he knew how. By becoming a soldier in a war he never asked to fight. "Watch your sister," Clara said. "I need to check the road ahead." Tommy nodded his hand, finding lilies in the darkness. He would protect her. He always did. The second day brought worse weather. The snow turned to sleet, then to freezing rain that coated everything in ice. The mule stumbled more than once, and Clara had to climb down and lead it by the bridle. Her hands grew numb. Her feet lost feeling. But she kept walking. Behind her, the children huddled together under blankets that grew wetter by the hour. Danny had developed a cough that rattled in his small chest. Lily remained silent, her eyes fixed on some distant point that only she could see. Clara began to wonder if she had made a mistake. Perhaps dying slowly in Vernon's house would have been better than dying quickly in the wilderness. At least there had been warmth. At least there had been walls. But then she remembered the sound of Danny's body hitting the wall. She remembered the look in Vernon's eyes afterward. Not remorse, not horror, just cold satisfaction, as if he had finally put something in its proper place. No, she had made the right choice. Whatever happened now, at least her children would die free. On the third day they reached the town of Thornfield, Montana. It was little more than a collection of wooden buildings huddled together against the cold. A general store, a saloon, a church with a crooked steeple, a blacksmith shop with smoke rising from its chimney. Clara had never seen anything so beautiful. She stopped the wagon at the edge of town and counted her remaining money. $14, enough for a few days at most, not nearly enough to start a new life. The children slept in the wagon bed, exhausted beyond waking. Clara climbed down and walked toward the general store, hoping to buy some food and perhaps ask about work. She was a good cook. She could sew and clean and tend to livestock. Surely someone in this town needed help. The store was warm and smelled of tobacco and coffee and dried herbs. Clara stood just inside the door, letting the heat wash over her frozen skin. Behind the counter, a middle-aged woman with gray hair and sharp eyes watched her approach. "Help you? I am looking for work," Clara said. "Cooking or cleaning or whatever needs doing. I have 3 children and very little money." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Where is your husband?" Clara had prepared this lie carefully. "Dead, fever, 6 months ago." "I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you." The woman studied her for a long moment, taking in the worn dress, the hollow cheeks, the shadows under her eyes. Clara knew what she saw. A desperate woman, a burden, a problem someone else would have to solve. "I do not have any work," the woman said finally. "But there is a notice on the post outside. Rancher up north looking for a cook. Room and board plus wages. Might be worth your while." Clara thanked her and bought a small bag of flour with some of her precious money. Outside, she found the notice nailed to a wooden post half covered in ice. Wanted. Cook for winter season. Room and board provided plus honest wages. Jacob Mercer. Ridgeback Ranch. 4 miles north of town. Clara read the notice 3 times, room and board, a place to stay through the winter, a chance for her children to sleep in real beds, to eat real food, to be safe from the cold. But the notice said cook. One person, not a woman with 3 children, not a family fleeing from a husband who would eventually come looking. Clara folded the notice and tucked it inside her coat anyway. She had nothing else. No other options. No other hope. 4 miles north, a rancher named Jacob Mercer was looking for help. 4 miles north, Clara Whitmore would beg for one winter. Just one winter. Enough time to figure out what came next. She climbed back into the wagon and took up the reins. The road to Ridgeback Ranch wound through country that seemed designed to kill the unwary. Steep hills, frozen streams, drifts of snow that rose higher than the wagon wheels. The mules struggled with every step, and Clara began to fear they would not make it before dark. Tommy sat beside her now, his young face pale but determined. He had insisted on leaving the wagon bed so his weight would not slow them down. "How much farther, Mama?" "Not far, baby. Just over that ridge." She did not know if this was true. She only knew that stopping meant death. The temperature was dropping. The sky was darkening. If they did not find shelter soon, they would not survive the night. Danny coughed in the wagon bed, a wet, rattling sound that filled Clara with dread. Her youngest son was sick, truly sick, the kind of sick that required medicine and warmth and rest, none of which she could provide. "Please, God," Clara prayed silently, "please let this rancher be a good man. Please let him take us in." She had stopped believing in God years ago. Vernon had beaten the faith out of her the same way he beat everything else. But desperation made believers of even the most hardened skeptics, and Clara was desperate enough to try anything. The ranch appeared just as the sun was setting. It sat in a valley between 2 hills, sheltered from the worst of the wind. A sturdy house with smoke rising from its chimney, a large barn with doors that looked recently painted, fences that ran in straight lines, well maintained despite the winter weather. Everything spoke of order and care and the kind of hard work that built lasting things. Clara stopped the wagon at the gate and waited. She knew better than to enter a stranger's property uninvited. In the West, that was a good way to get shot. A man emerged from the barn. He was tall, with shoulders broad enough to block the doorway behind him. His hair was dark brown with streaks of gray at the temples. His face was weathered and lined, carved by years of wind and sun and the kind of work that wore men down to their essential elements. But it was his eyes that caught Clara's attention. Gray eyes, deep set and shadowed, carrying a weight that she recognized. This was a man who had lost something. Something precious. Something he had not stopped mourning. He walked toward them slowly, a rifle held loosely at his side. Not threatening, but ready. This was his land, and he would defend it. "Ma'am," his voice was low and rough like gravel tumbling in a creek bed. "You lost." "No, sir." Clara lifted her chin despite her exhaustion. "I saw your notice in town. You are looking for a cook." His eyes moved past her to the wagon where 3 small faces peered out from beneath thin blankets. Something shifted in his expression. A crack in the stone. That notice was for one person. "I know." Clara kept her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. "But my children are quiet. They will help with chores. I will work dawn to dusk. I do not complain. I do not cause trouble." He studied her for a long moment. Clara could feel his gaze like a physical weight pressing against her skin. She wondered what he saw. A desperate woman, certainly. A liar, possibly, but also perhaps something worth saving. "Where is your husband?" The lie came easily now. She had told it so many times it almost felt like truth. "Dead, fever, 6 months ago." His eyes narrowed slightly, and Clara knew he did not believe her. This man had seen too much of the world to be fooled by a simple lie. But he did not call her on it. He only nodded, accepting her words at face value. "I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you." The wind picked up, driving ice crystals into Clara's face. In the wagon, Danny coughed again, and she saw the rancher's jaw tighten. "Please." The word escaped before she could stop it, raw with desperation. "Just one winter. I will sleep in the barn if you want. I will do whatever you ask. Just please do not turn us away." The man looked at Danny, whose small face was flushed with fever. He looked at Tommy, standing straight as a soldier despite his exhaustion. He looked at Lily, whose empty eyes held a sorrow no child should know. Something changed in his face. A decision made. Barn is no place for children. He turned and began walking toward the house. Bring the wagon in. I will get the fire going. Clara felt tears burning in her eyes, but she blinked them back. There would be time for crying later. Right now, she needed to be strong. Thank you, she called after him. Thank you, Mr. He paused at the door and looked back. Mercer, Jacob Mercer. And do not thank me yet. Winter up here is hard. You might wish I had turned you away. Then he disappeared inside, and Clara was left alone with her children in the dying light. She did not care about hard winters. She did not care about anything except the smoke rising from that chimney and the promise of warmth behind those walls. For the first time in 3 days, Clara Whitmore allowed herself to hope. The inside of Jacob Mercer's house was smaller than Clara expected, but warmer than anything she had felt in days. A fire burned low in a stone hearth, casting dancing shadows on walls made of rough-hewn logs. The furniture was sparse but sturdy. A table with 4 chairs, a rocking chair near the fire, shelves lined with books and tools, and the accumulated debris of a solitary life. Jacob moved with quiet efficiency, adding wood to the fire and setting a kettle to boil. He did not speak, and Clara did not push. Some silences were meant to be respected. The children stood near the door, uncertain. Tommy's hand was wrapped around Lily's, and Danny leaned against his mother's leg, too exhausted to stand on his own. They looked like refugees from some distant war, which Clara supposed they were. There is a room in the back, Jacob said without turning around. 2 beds should be enough for the children. You can take the pallet by the fire. We do not want to put you out. You are not. He straightened and finally met her eyes. I do not use that room anymore. There was something in his voice, a hardness that covered something softer, something wounded. Clara recognized it because she carried the same weight herself. She did not ask what had happened in that room. She did not need to. Some losses were too deep for words. Thank you, she said simply. Jacob nodded and turned back to the fire. That night, Clara fed her children hot soup and warm bread. She watched Danny eat with an appetite he had not shown in days. She watched Lily chew mechanically, her eyes still distant, but her hands steady. She watched Tommy relax for the first time since they had left Kansas, his shoulders dropping as the tension slowly drained away. They were safe. For now, at least they were safe. After the children were asleep, Clara sat by the fire and watched the flames dance. Jacob sat across from her, reading a book whose title she could not see. Neither of them spoke. Outside, the wind howled like something hungry. Snow piled against the windows, sealing them in. The world beyond these walls had become a white void, hostile and empty. But inside there was warmth. Inside there was light. Clara did not realize she was crying until she felt the tears on her cheeks. Here. She looked up to find Jacob holding out a handkerchief. His face was expressionless, but his eyes were not unkind. Thank you. She wiped her face, embarrassed by her weakness. I do not usually. You do not need to explain. He returned to his chair and picked up his book. Everybody breaks sometime. Clara studied him in the firelight, this stranger who had taken them in. He was perhaps 40 years old, maybe a few years younger. His hands were calloused from work, his face lined from weather. There was gray in his hair and sorrow in his eyes and a stillness about him that spoke of long practice. Why did you help us? She asked. You could have turned us away. Most people would have. Jacob did not answer immediately. He stared at the fire, and Clara saw something flicker across his face. Memory, perhaps, or regret. Because somebody should have stopped, he said finally. A long time ago, somebody should have stopped for me. He did not elaborate. He did not need to. Clara understood what he was not saying. Whatever had happened to him, whatever had carved those lines into his face, it had left him with a debt. And helping her was how he paid it. Get some sleep, he said, rising from his chair. Tomorrow we will see what you can do. Clara watched him walk to his room at the far end of the house. He moved like a man carrying a heavy load, his shoulders bowed under invisible weight. She did not know his story. She did not know what ghosts haunted his dreams, but she recognized a fellow survivor when she saw one. Whatever had brought them together, they were connected now. Two broken people trying to make it through one winter. Clara pulled her blanket tighter and closed her eyes. Outside, the snow continued to fall. The first week at Ridgeback Ranch passed in a blur of work and recovery. Clara threw herself into cooking with a desperation that surprised even her. She made biscuits and gravy and fried eggs for breakfast. She made stew and cornbread for dinner. She baked pies from dried apples and preserves she found in the cellar. Every meal was better than the last, as if she were trying to prove her worth through flour and butter and heat. Jacob ate without complaint, which Clara eventually learned was high praise. He was not a man who spoke unless speaking was necessary. He communicated through nods and grunts and the occasional lifted eyebrow. But his portions grew larger with each passing day, and sometimes, when he thought she was not looking, Clara caught him smiling at the taste of something she had made. The children began to heal each in their own way. Danny's cough faded with rest and warm food. His fever broke on the third night, and by the fifth day, he was following Jacob around the ranch like a small shadow. He was fascinated by the horses, especially a gentle old gelding named Copper, who seemed to tolerate the boy's constant attention. "Can I brush him? Can I feed him? Can I ride him?" Danny's questions were endless, and Jacob answered each one with the same patient brevity. "Yes, yes, not yet." Tommy was harder to reach. He worked alongside Jacob without complaint, learning to chop wood and mend fences and care for livestock. But he never relaxed. He never smiled. He watched Jacob with the same wary vigilance he had once reserved for Vernon, waiting for the mask to slip, waiting for the violence to emerge. "He does not trust me," Jacob observed one evening after Tommy had gone to bed. Clara looked up from her mending. "He does not trust anyone, not anymore." His father? She did not answer. She did not need to. Jacob nodded slowly, understanding without words. "Give him time. Trust is not something you can force, my son." Lily remained the most concerning. She ate when food was placed before her and slept when she was told to sleep. She helped Clara in the kitchen, her small hands surprisingly deft with a rolling pin. But she did not speak. Not one word. Not one sound. Clara tried everything. She read to Lily from the few children's books she found in Jacob's sparse library. She sang the songs her own mother had sung to her decades ago. She held Lily close at night and whispered that everything would be all right, that they were safe now, that no one would ever hurt them again. Lily listened. Lily watched. But Lily did not speak. "How long since she talked?" Jacob asked one evening, watching Lily draw pictures by the fire. 12 days now." Clara's voice was thick with worry. "Since the night Vernon hurt Danny." Jacob was quiet for a moment. Then he crossed the room and sat down beside Lily on the floor. He did not say anything. He just picked up a piece of paper and began to draw. Clara watched from across the room as Jacob sketched a crude horse with uneven legs and a lopsided head. Lily looked at his drawing, then at him, then at her own paper. Slowly, carefully, she began to draw a horse of her own. It was better than Jacob's. Much better. She had inherited Clara's steady hands and keen eye. Jacob pointed at her drawing and nodded approvingly. Then he began to draw something else. A barn, a tree, a sun with rays spreading across the page. Lily matched each drawing with one of her own, and though she did not speak, something in her posture shifted. Her shoulders dropped. Her breath came easier. For the first time since that terrible night, she looked almost peaceful. Clara pressed her hand to her mouth to keep from crying. Later, after the children were asleep, she found Jacob on the porch staring at the stars. "Thank you," she said, "for what you did with Lily." He shrugged. "Sometimes words are not what people need." "How did you know?" He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant, as if coming from very far away. "I had a daughter once, Sarah. She was born quiet, did not speak until she was almost 3. Everyone said something was wrong with her, but my wife, she knew better. She said Sarah was just listening, taking in the world before she decided what to say about it." Clara held her breath. This was more than Jacob had ever shared. "What happened to her?" she asked softly. Jacob's jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists at his sides. "They are gone," he said. "Both of them. 3 years now." He did not say how. He did not need to. The way his voice broke on that single word, "gone," told Clara everything. "I am sorry," she whispered. "So am I." They stood together in the darkness, two people bound by loss, and watched the stars turn overhead. Clara did not know what the future held. She did not know if Vernon would find them, or if they would survive the winter, or if Lily would ever speak again. But standing here in this moment, with this quiet, wounded man beside her, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope, small and fragile like a flame in the wind, but real. For the first time in years, Clara Whitmore believed that tomorrow might be better than today. 1 week after they arrived at Ridgeback Ranch, the first letter came. Jacob returned from town with supplies and a strange expression on his face. He handed Clara an envelope without a word. No return address, no name, just her name Clara written in handwriting she knew better than her own. Her hands shook as she tore it open. Inside was a single piece of paper with a single line of text. I know where you are. The paper slipped from Clara's fingers and fluttered to the floor. Who is looking for you? Jacob asked quietly. Clara looked up at him, and all the lies she had prepared crumbled to dust. My husband, she whispered. He is alive. He is coming. Jacob did not step back. He did not look away. He simply stood there, solid as stone, waiting for the rest. And so Clara told him. She told him about the wedding when she was 22, how handsome Vernon had been, how charming, how full of promises. She told him about the first slap 3 months into the marriage, and how Vernon had cried afterward and sworn it would never happen again. She told him about the beatings that followed, each one worse than the last, each one followed by tears and apologies and gifts meant to buy her silence. She told him about the pregnancies, each one shadowed by fear. About the night she lay awake wondering if her children would inherit their father's cruelty. About the moment she realized they already had. Not his cruelty itself, but the wounds it left. Tommy's vigilance. Lily's silence. Danny's flinching at Ray's voices. She told him about the night Vernon threw Danny against the wall and how she had finally understood that staying meant death. Not hers. She had made peace with her own death long ago. But her children's. Vernon would kill them eventually. It was only a matter of time. When she finished, Clara's face was wet with tears she did not remember shedding. Her voice was hoarse. Her hands were trembling. Jacob had not moved, had not spoken, had not looked away. You should leave, he said finally. If he finds you here, I do not know if I can protect you. Clara's heart sank. She had known this was coming. No one wanted to inherit someone else's trouble. But then Jacob continued. However, he said, his voice hardening, you can stay, if you want. Clara stared at him. Why would you risk that? Jacob was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion he rarely showed. Because I failed to protect the people I loved, he said, and I will not fail again. Something shifted between them in that moment. An understanding, a pact. Two damaged people agreeing to stand together against whatever came. Clara reached out and took his hand. His fingers were rough with calluses, his palm warm despite the cold. Thank you, she said. He did not answer. He did not need to. Outside, the wind picked up, driving snow against the windows. Somewhere in the distance, Vernon Whitmore was coming, and the storm was just beginning. The letter changed everything. Jacob moved through the house with new purpose, checking locks that had not been checked in years, testing hinges that had grown stiff from disuse. He brought his rifle in from the barn and leaned it beside the front door, always within reach. At night, he slept in the rocking chair by the fire instead of his bedroom, his ears tuned to every sound the wind carried. Clara watched these preparations with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. She had brought danger to this man's door. She had repaid his kindness with the promise of violence. Yet Jacob did not complain. He did not question. He simply adapted the way a man adapts to changing weather or a wolf at the edge of his territory. You should teach Tommy the escape routes, Jacob said one morning, spreading a hand-drawn map across the kitchen table. Here through the back pasture, there is a cave in the hillside about half a mile north, big enough to hide in for days if necessary. Clara studied the map, memorizing the paths he had marked. You have thought about this before. A man living alone learns to plan for trouble. She wanted to ask what trouble he had planned for, what dangers had haunted his nights before she arrived. But the question felt too intimate, too close to wounds she was not ready to probe. Instead, she said, I will teach him today. That afternoon, Clara took Tommy aside and showed him the map. She explained the routes, the landmarks, the hiding places. She watched her son's face as he absorbed each detail, his expression shifting from wariness to determination. If I say run, you take your brother and sister and you do not stop, Clara told him. You do not look back. You do not wait for me. You just run. Tommy's jaw tightened. I am not leaving you behind. You will if I tell you to. Clara gripped his shoulders, forcing him to meet her eyes. Promise me, Tommy. Promise me you will keep them safe. For a long moment, her son was silent. Then slowly he nodded. I promise. Clara pulled him into a fierce embrace, holding on longer than she should have. He was 10 years old. He should be climbing trees and catching frogs and dreaming about the adventures he would have when he grew up. Instead, he was learning escape routes and making promises that no child should have to make. Vernon had taken so much from them, but he would not take this. He would not take her children. Not while Clara still had breath in her body. 3 days after the first letter, the rider appeared. Jacob saw him first. He was mending a fence at the edge of the property when movement caught his eye. A single horseman silhouetted against the gray sky, sitting motionless at the top of the ridge, watching. Jacob's hand moved instinctively to the rifle slung across his back. He did not draw it, not yet, but his fingers found the familiar wood of the stock, ready to swing it into position at a moment's notice. The rider did not approach. He simply sat there, a dark shape against the winter clouds, observing the ranch with the patience of a predator studying its prey. Then, as suddenly as he had appeared, he turned his horse and vanished over the ridge. Jacob stood motionless for a long moment, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. Then he walked back to the house, his pace measured but urgent. Someone was watching, he told Clara, from the north ridge. She felt the blood drain from her face. Vernon could not tell from that distance, but someone is scouting us. Clara's hands trembled as she wiped them on her apron. What do? We prepare. Jacob checked the rifle, ensuring it was loaded, and we wait. That night, Jacob moved the children's beds into the main room. He pushed the heavy oak table against the back door and wedged a chair under the front door handle. Every window was checked, every lock tested. Tommy watched these preparations with solemn eyes. He did not ask questions. He simply found a position near the window where he could see the approach to the house and settled there with his sharpened stick across his knees. Jacob paused beside him. You have good instincts, he said quietly. But if trouble comes, your job is to protect your brother and sister, not to fight. What if you cannot stop them? Then you run, like your mother taught you. Tommy's grip tightened on his stick. I do not want to run anymore. Jacob knelt down so they were eye to eye. Running is not cowardice. Running is smart. You save the fight for when you can win. Understand? For a long moment, Tommy studied Jacob's face. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy something deep inside him. He nodded slowly. I understand. Good. Jacob rose and moved toward the door. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we work. But none of them slept well that night. Clara lay on her pallet by the fire, listening to every creak and groan of the old house. Beside her, Lily pressed close, her small body tense with unnamed fears. Danny whimpered in his sleep, lost in dreams that Clara hoped were kinder than reality. Outside, the wind moaned through the cottonwoods like a voice carrying warnings. Somewhere in the darkness, eyes were watching, and the storm was drawing closer. The second letter arrived, nailed to the fence post. Jacob found it during his morning rounds, the paper stiff with frost, the words written in the same hand as before. You should have stayed home. He brought it to Clara without comment. She read it once, then crumpled it in her fist, her knuckles white with anger. He thinks fear will bring me back. Wait, she said, her voice cold. He is wrong. Jacob watched her, something like respect flickering in his gray eyes. Most people would be packing by now. I am not most people. Clara threw the crumpled letter into the fire and watched it burn. I spent 10 years being afraid. I am done with fear. That evening, while the children slept, Clara and Jacob sat by the fire and talked in low voices. He will not come himself, Clara said. On at first, Vernon is a coward at heart. He hires men to do his dirty work. How many men? I do not know. He has money, enough to buy loyalty at least for a while. Jacob stared into the flames, his face unreadable. We need help. I cannot hold off a group by myself. Who would help us? I know people in town. Good people. But they will not act without proof. Right now, you are just a woman with a story. Clara felt a familiar weight of helplessness settling on her shoulders. She had spent years being disbelieved, years having her truth dismissed as hysteria or exaggeration, or the complaints of a difficult wife. Vernon was charming. Vernon was respected. Vernon knew how to make people see what he wanted them to see. Then we find proof, she said, or we find others who have suffered like me. Jacob looked at her sharply. Others? Vernon is not the kind of man who hurts just one woman. There will be others. There always are. Something shifted in Jacob's expression. A hardening. A decision. If you find them, he said slowly, would they speak? I do not know, but I have to try. She expected him to argue, to tell her it was too dangerous, too foolish, too likely to fail. Instead, he simply nodded. Then we need a plan. They talked late into the night, their voices barely above whispers. By the time dawn light crept through the windows, they had the beginnings of a strategy. It was risky. It required Clara to leave the ranch to venture into territory where Vernon's influence might reach. But it was their only chance. Clara looked at Jacob across the dying fire. You do not have to do this, she said. You could send us away. Tell Vernon you never saw us. He might believe you. Jacob was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion he rarely showed. 3 years ago, I lost my wife and daughter. The words seemed to cost him, something dragged up from depths he normally kept sealed. Margaret and Sarah, fire took them while I was in town buying medicine. Clara held her breath, afraid that any sound might stop him. I found out later that Margaret's first husband, a man she had fled years before, had tracked her down. He set the fire. By the time I got home, there was nothing left but ash and bones. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I hunted him. Jacob continued, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. For 3 months, I tracked him across 2 territories. When I found him, I killed him with my bare hands. It did not bring them back. It did not fill the hole they left. But at least I knew he would never hurt anyone else. He looked at Clara then, and she saw the full weight of his grief for the first time. It was wet, oceanic, a sorrow that had carved canyons through his soul. I will not let another man take what I could not protect, he said. Not again. Not while I still have strength to fight. Clara reached across the space between them and took his hand. His fingers curled around hers, rough and warm. We will fight together, she said. He did not answer, but his grip tightened, and that was enough. On the 5th day, everything changed. The stranger appeared at the gate just before noon. He was alone, his hands raised, no weapons visible. But Clara recognized the shape of him before she could make out his face, and her blood turned to ice. Stay inside, Jacob said, reaching for his rifle. Wait, Clara grabbed his arm. I know him. That is Marcus, Vernon's brother. Jacob's aim did not waver. Then he is the enemy. Maybe, maybe not. Let me talk to him. Before Jacob could stop her, Clara stepped onto the porch. The cold hit her like a slap, but she ignored it. Her eyes were fixed on the man at the gate. Marcus Whitmore was 30 years old, but he looked older. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, his shoulders bent with the weight of something Clara could not name. He stood at the gate with his hands still raised, making no move to enter. Clara, his voice cracked on her name. I need to talk to you. Talk from there, Jacob called from the doorway, rifle trained on Marcus's chest. Marcus nodded slowly. Fair enough. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. I came to warn you. Vernon has a warrant. He is telling everyone you kidnapped the children. Clara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. That is a lie. I know. Marcus's voice was raw. He paid a judge in Kansas, Howard Crane. The papers were signed 2 days after you left. Jacob came to stand beside Clara, his presence solid and reassuring. Why are you telling us this? He is your brother. Marcus flinched as if the words were a blow. Because I watched him hurt her. For 10 years I watched, and I did nothing. His voice broke. I watched him hurt other women too. I told myself it was not my business. I told myself there was nothing I could do. I was a coward. What changed? Clara asked. Marcus looked at her then, and she saw tears tracking down his weathered cheeks. I saw your daughter, Lily, the way she does not speak. The way she looks at the world like she is waiting for the next blow. He shook his head, wiping his face with a trembling hand. There was another little girl once. Rebecca Foster's daughter, Amy. She was 14. She stopped speaking too, just like Lily. A week later, she was dead. The words hung in the air like ice crystals. Vernon killed her. Marcus continued, his voice dropping to a hoarse whisper. He pushed her down the stairs because she saw something she should not have seen. I was there. I watched him do it. And I said nothing. Clara's legs threatened to give way. She reached out and gripped Jacob's arm for support. You let him murder a child. Jacob's voice was flat, dangerous. Yes. Marcus did not try to defend himself. I let him murder a child, and I have hated myself every day since. He reached into his coat, moving slowly so Jacob would not shoot. He pulled out a bundle of papers. But I am done being a coward. These are letters, testimonies, names and addresses of women Vernon hurt. Martha Jennings in Dodge City, Rebecca Foster near the Nebraska border. There are others. He held the papers out like an offering, like a penance. If you want to stop him, Marcus said, you cannot do it alone. You need witnesses. You need proof. These women can give you both. Clara stared at the papers in his hand. Her mind was racing, trying to process everything she had heard. Vernon had killed a child. Vernon had hurt other women. Vernon had been doing this for years, maybe decades, leaving a trail of broken bodies and silenced voices. And Marcus had known. He had watched. He had done nothing. She should hate him. Part of her did. But another part, the part that understood what it meant to be trapped in Vernon's orbit, recognized the familiar weight of shame in his eyes. Why should I trust you? She asked. You should not, Marcus said simply. I have done nothing to earn your trust, but I am telling the truth. And if you give me a chance, I will help you stop him. Clara looked at Jacob. His face was hard, his finger still on the trigger. Your call, he said quietly. Whatever you decide, I will support it. She turned back to Marcus, the brother of the man who had tormented her for a decade, the witness to horrors who had chosen silence over justice, the coward who was finally trying to make things right. Come inside, she said. Jacob lowered his rifle slowly. His eyes never left Marcus as the younger man walked through the gate. One wrong move, Jacob said, and I will end you. Marcus nodded. I would expect nothing less. Inside the house, Marcus spread his papers across the kitchen table. Letters, sworn statements, addresses, a decade of Vernon's crimes documented by a brother who had watched from the shadows. Martha Jennings was first. Marcus pointed to a name near the top of the list. Vernon courted her 5 years ago. He told her his wife had died. When she found out he was lying, she tried to end things. He broke 3 of her ribs. Clara felt sick. She remembered 5 years ago. Vernon had come home late, his knuckles bruised, his shirt stained with something dark. He had told her he had been in a fight at the saloon. She had believed him. Rebecca Foster came next. Marcus continued. Vernon had an affair with her for 2 years. When she wanted to end it, he threatened her family. Her daughter Amy started asking questions. She found letters, evidence. Vernon could not let that stand. So he killed her. Clara's voice was hollow. Marcus nodded, unable to meet her eyes. He pushed her down the stairs, made it look like an accident. The sheriff ruled it a tragic fall. Rebecca knew the truth, but no one believed her. Vernon made sure of that. Jacob studied the papers with cold intensity. These women, will they testify? I do not know, Marcus admitted. They are afraid. Vernon has power. He has connections. He has made it very clear what happens to people who cross him. Then we need to give them courage, Clara said. We need to show them they are not alone. She looked at the names on the list. Martha Jennings, Rebecca Foster, women she had never met but who shared her wounds, women who had suffered in silence just as she had, women who might, if given the chance, help her bring Vernon down. I will go to them, Clara said. I will convince them to speak. Jacob shook his head. Too dangerous. Vernon is looking for you. He is looking for a woman traveling alone with 3 children. If I go with Marcus, we can move faster, attract less attention, and leave the children here with him coming. Clara felt the impossible weight of the choice pressing down on her. Leave her children and risk never seeing them again. Stay with them and watch Vernon's net close around them all. You will protect them, she said to Jacob. You promised. Clara, I cannot. You can. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so the children would not hear. You are the only one I trust. The only one who can keep them safe while I do what needs to be done. Jacob's jaw worked silently. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the desire to protect her warring with the knowledge that she was right. If something happens to you, he began, then you raise them. Clara placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath her palm. You give them the life Vernon never would. Promise me. For a long moment, Jacob was silent. Then slowly he nodded. I promise. Clara turned to Marcus. How soon can we leave? Tomorrow morning, early. The longer we wait, the harder this gets. Then tomorrow it is. That night, Clara told the children. She gathered them around the fire after dinner, their faces illuminated by the dancing flames. Danny sat in her lap, drowsy from the warmth. Tommy stood apart, his arms crossed, his expression guarded. Lily leaned against the hearth, her eyes fixed on something only she could see. I have to go away for a little while, Clara said carefully. There are people I need to talk to, people who can help us stop your father from finding us. Danny's face crumpled. Do not go, Mama. What if he catches you? He will not. Clara kissed his forehead. I will be careful, and Mr. Jacob will take care of you while I am gone. Tommy's eyes narrowed. How long? A few days, maybe a week. And if you do not come back? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications no 10-year-old should understand. Clara felt her heart crack along familiar fault lines. I will come back, she said firmly. I promise. Tommy did not look convinced, but he nodded slowly, accepting her word because there was nothing else to accept. Lily did not react at all. She sat motionless, her gaze distant, her silence absolute. Clara reached out and took her daughter's hand. Lily, sweetheart, I need you to look at me. Slowly, as if moving through water, Lily turned her head. Her eyes met Clara's, and for a moment Clara saw something flicker in their depths. Recognition, understanding, fear. I am coming back, Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. I will always come back. Do you believe me? Lily did not answer, but her fingers tightened around Clara's, and that was enough. Later, when the children were asleep, Jacob walked Clara to the door. You should rest, he said. Tomorrow will be hard. I know. Clara pulled her shawl tighter against the cold seeping through the cracks in the walls. Jacob, there is something I need to tell you. He waited, patient as always. I am not the same woman who arrived here 2 weeks ago. Clara said slowly, choosing her words with care. That woman was broken, afraid, ready to die. She looked up at him, meeting his gray eyes in the dim light. You gave me something I had almost forgotten. Hope, a reason to fight. Whatever happens, I want you to know that. Jacob was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Margaret used to say that hope was like a seed. It could grow anywhere if you gave it a chance. He reached out, hesitant, and brushed a strand of hair from Clara's face. I think she was right. Clara leaned into his touch just for a moment, just long enough to feel the warmth of human connection, the comfort of a hand that did not hurt. Then she stepped back. Watch over them, she said. They are all I have. They will be safe, Jacob promised. I swear it. Clara nodded and walked to her pallet by the fire. But sleep was a long time coming. The morning Clara left, the sky was iron gray and heavy with snow. Marcus waited by the wagon, stamping his feet against the cold. Jacob stood on the porch, rifle in hand, watching the surrounding hills for any sign of movement. The children gathered at the door. Danny clung to Clara's skirt, crying softly. Come back soon, Mama. Promise. I promise, baby. Clara knelt and held him tight. Be good for Mr. Jacob. Help with the chores. Look after your sister. She turned to Tommy, who stood rigid and pale, his jaw set against emotions he refused to show. You are the man of the house while I am gone, Clara said. I am counting on you. I will not let you down. Tommy's voice was steady, but his eyes were too bright. Just come back. I will. Finally, Clara turned to Lily. Her daughter stood slightly apart, her arms wrapped around herself, her face blank. But as Clara approached, something shifted in Lily's expression. A softening, a reaching. Lily raised her hand and pressed something into Clara's palm. A drawing, crude but clear. 4 figures standing in front of a house. A woman, 3 children, and a tall man beside them. Clara's throat tightened. This was the first thing Lily had communicated in weeks. The first sign that somewhere inside her, silence, her daughter was still there. "It is beautiful," Clara whispered. "I will keep it with me always." Lily said nothing, but she leaned forward and pressed her cheek against Clara's, a gesture so tender it nearly broke Clara's resolve. "I will come back," Clara said fiercely. "I swear on everything I have, I will come back." Then before she could change her mind, Clara climbed into the wagon beside Marcus. She did not look back as they pulled away. She could not. Jacob stood on the porch watching the wagon until it disappeared over the ridge. Then he turned to the 3 children standing in the doorway. "Come on," he said quietly. "We have work to do." The siege began the next day. Jacob was in the barn when he heard the hoofbeats, multiple horses coming fast from the south. He grabbed his rifle and ran for the house, shouting for the children, "Inside now." Tommy reacted instantly, grabbing Danny with one hand and Lily with the other, pulling them toward the back room where the trap door to the root cellar waited. Jacob reached the porch just as the riders crested the ridge. 4 men, armed, moving with the confidence of hunters who have cornered their prey. "Get in the cellar," Jacob told Tommy. "Do not come out until I tell you. But no arguments. Go." Tommy herded his siblings through the trap door, pulling it shut behind them. In the darkness below, 3 children huddled together, listening to the muffled sounds of confrontation overhead. On the porch, Jacob faced the riders. The leader was a heavy-set man with a deputy's star pinned to his chest and a smirk on his weather-beaten face. He reined in his horse at the edge of the yard, making no move to dismount. "Jacob Mercer," the deputy's voice was loud, designed to carry. "We have a warrant for the arrest of Clara Whitmore and her 3 children. Hand them over." "No one here by that name?" Jacob replied calmly. The deputy laughed. "We tracked her here. Witnesses saw her wagon heading north. You are the only ranch for miles. Do not play games with me." "I am not playing." Jacob raised his rifle slowly, deliberately. "You are trespassing on my land. I suggest you leave." The deputy's smirk faded. His hand moved toward his holster. "You sure you want to do this, old man? There are 4 of us." "I see 4. Jacob's voice was cold. "I have 15 rounds. That is more than enough." For a long moment, no one moved. The wind whipped through the yard, carrying snow and silence. Then Jacob fired. The bullet kicked up dirt inches from the deputy's horse. The animal reared, nearly throwing its rider. "That was a warning," Jacob said. "Next one will not miss." The deputy's face twisted with rage. But he was not stupid. He could see the steadiness in Jacob's hands, the certainty in his eyes. This was not a man who made idle threats. "This is not over," the deputy snarled. "We will be back with more men. I will be waiting." The riders wheeled their horses and galloped away, disappearing into the gathering storm. Jacob watched them go. His rifle still raised, his finger still on the trigger. Only when they were completely out of sight did he allow himself to exhale. His legs gave out. He sat down heavily on the porch steps, his hands shaking with delayed adrenaline. The wound in his shoulder, an old injury that never quite healed, throbbed with remembered pain. He had bluffed. 4 against 1 were bad odds, even for a man who had spent his life fighting. If they had called his bluff, if they had pushed. But they had not, and that bought them time. Jacob pulled himself to his feet and went to get the children. In the cellar, 3 small faces looked up at him. Danny was crying silently. Lily was pale as milk, but Tommy stood straight, a broken board clutched in his hands like a weapon. "Are they gone?" Tommy asked. "For now." Jacob reached down to help them up. "But they will be back." That night, Jacob barricaded the doors and windows. He taught Tommy how to load the rifle, how to aim, how to shoot if he had to. The boy learned quickly, his hands steady despite his fear. "If they break through," Jacob said, "you shoot anyone who is not me or your mother. Understand?" Tommy nodded. "I understand." "Good." Jacob looked at the 2 younger children, huddled together on the pallet by the fire. "Get some sleep, all of you. Tomorrow we prepare." But sleep came hard for all of them. In the darkness, Jacob sat by the window, watching the snow fall, waiting for the next attack. 200 miles away, Clara was fighting a different battle. She found Martha Jennings in a boarding house in Dodge City. The woman who answered the door was thin and frightened with fading bruises on her arms that she tried to hide beneath long sleeves. "My name is Clara Whitmore," Clara said. "I am Vernon's wife." Martha tried to close the door. Clara stopped it with her foot. "I am not here to hurt you. I am here because I need your help." "I cannot help you." Martha's voice was barely a whisper. "He will kill me. He will kill us all if we do not stop him." Clara reached out, taking Martha's trembling hands. "I know what he did to you. I know about the broken ribs, the threats, the fear. I lived it too. For 10 years I lived it." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "No one believes me. No one ever believes me." "I believe you." Clara squeezed her hands. "And together we can make others believe too." It took hours, hours of talking, of crying, of sharing stories that neither woman had ever told anyone. Hours of building trust from the wreckage of two broken lives. But in the end, Martha said yes. "I will testify." Her voice shook, but her eyes were steady. "If you promise, I will not be alone. You will never be alone again." Clara promised. "I swear it." One ally down, one more to find. Rebecca Foster was harder. Clara found her in a cabin near the Nebraska border, a woman aged beyond her years by grief and fear. Rebecca had lost everything. Her daughter, her husband, who had left when he could not bear her accusations anymore, her reputation destroyed by Vernon's lies. When Clara knocked on her door, Rebecca ran. Clara chased her through the snow, calling out until her voice was hoarse. "Rebecca, please, I know what he did to Amy. I know he killed her." Rebecca stopped running. She turned her face twisted with rage and pain. "You do not know anything." She spat. "No one knows. No one cares." "Marcus told me." Clara approached slowly, hands raised. "Vernon's brother, he was there that night. He saw everything." The color drained from Rebecca's face. "Marcus. He is willing to testify. He wrote it all down. The truth about what happened to Amy." Rebecca collapsed to her knees in the snow. The sound that came from her throat was not quite human. It was the cry of a mother who had carried her grief alone for years, finally hearing that someone believed her. Clara knelt beside her. "Help me stop him," she said. "Help me make sure he never hurts another child." Rebecca looked up, her eyes red and raw. "I will kill him myself if I have to," she whispered. "You will not have to." Clara helped her to her feet. "We will do this the right way, with witnesses and evidence and the law on our side." "The law has never been on my side." "Then we will change that." Clara gripped Rebecca's arms, willing her strength across the distance between them. Together. Back at the ranch, Jacob was fighting to stay alive. The second attack came at night. 6 men this time, armed with rifles and torches. They crept through the darkness like wolves surrounding the house on all sides. Jacob saw them coming. He had been watching for them, sleeping in shifts, never letting his guard down. "Cellar," he told the children. "Now." They went without argument. They had learned. The attackers expected an easy victory. They expected a single man, outnumbered and outgunned, to surrender or die. They did not expect the traps. Jacob had spent the previous day preparing. Tripwires strung across the approaches. Bells hidden in the bushes. Sharp stakes buried beneath the snow. The first attacker hit a tripwire and went down hard, his rifle discharging into the air. The second triggered a bell that rang out clear and sharp, announcing his position. The third found a stake with his foot and screamed. Jacob picked them off from the darkness. 1 shot, 2, 3. The remaining attackers retreated, dragging their wounded comrades with them, but not before one of them got close enough to fire back. The bullet caught Jacob in the upper arm, spinning him around, dropping him to his knees. Blood soaked through his sleeve, hot and wet. He gritted his teeth against the pain and kept firing. Dawn found Jacob slumped against the porch railing, his arm wrapped in a makeshift bandage, his rifle still clutched in his good hand. The snow around the house was stained red in places. Tommy emerged from the cellar first. He took one look at Jacob and ran for the medical supplies. "You are hurt." The boy's voice was steady, but his hands shook as he cut away Jacob's bloody sleeve. "It is not bad," Jacob lied. The bullet was still in there somewhere. He could feel it grinding against bone every time he moved. "Hold still." Tommy began cleaning the wound with the efficiency of someone who had seen too much violence in his young life. This is going to hurt. I know. The boy worked in silence, his face pale but determined. When he finished bandaging the wound, he looked up at Jacob with eyes too old for his face. You did not leave us, Tommy said quietly. I promised your mother. My father promised things too. He never kept them. Jacob met the boy's gaze. I am not your father. Something shifted in Tommy's expression, a crack in the wall he had built around himself. I know, he said. That night Clara returned. She came with Marcus and two other women, their wagon rattling up the road in the purple twilight. When she saw the bloodstains in the snow, she ran. Jacob, he met her at the door, pale and unsteady, but alive. I am fine, he said. The children are safe. Clara threw her arms around him, not caring who saw, not caring about anything except the solid warmth of his body against hers. I thought she could not finish the sentence. I know. Jacob's good arm came up to hold her. But I am here. We are all here. Behind them, Martha and Rebecca climbed down from the wagon, their faces tight with fear and determination. Marcus helped them into the house where the children waited. Tommy stood with his siblings, his posture protective, his eyes wary. Mama. Danny broke free and ran to Clara, burying his face in her skirt. You came back. I told you I would. Clara knelt and gathered him close. I always keep my promises. Lilith approached more slowly, but when she reached Clara, she did something unexpected. She held out her hand. In her palm was another drawing, the same four figures as before. Mother, children, tall man. But this time there was something new, a word written in careful, crooked letters. Home. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. Her daughter had not spoken, but she had communicated something far more important. She had told Clara what she wanted. Home, family, safety, and Clara was going to give it to her, no matter what it cost. That night they made their plans. Vernon is in town, Marcus reported, 3 miles away. He has a dozen men with him. He is planning to come tomorrow with legal authority. What kind of legal authority? Jacob asked. The warrant from Kansas. He is going to claim Clara kidnapped the children. He has convinced the local sheriff to support him. Clara's jaw tightened. Then we need to act first. We need to tell our story before he can twist it. Where? Martha asked. Who will listen? The church, Rebecca said suddenly. Reverend Holbrook is a good man. He will hear us. And after that, Jacob pressed, after that we fight. Clara looked around the table at the faces gathered there. Marcus haunted by his complicity. Martha trembling but determined. Rebecca hardened by loss. Jacob wounded but unbroken. And herself. Clara Whitmore, who had been a victim for 10 years and was ready to become something else. Tomorrow, she said, we tell the truth and we let the town decide. Jacob reached across the table and took her hand. Whatever happens, he said, we face it together. Clara nodded. Outside, the snow had stopped falling. The sky was clearing, stars emerging one by one from behind the clouds. Tomorrow would bring the final battle. But tonight they had something Vernon could never take away. They had each other, and sometimes that was enough. The morning of the reckoning dawned cold and clear. Clara dressed in the only good dress she had brought from Kansas, a simple blue cotton that had seen better days but was clean and pressed. She brushed her hair until it shone and pinned it back from her face. When she looked in the small mirror Jacob kept by the wash basin, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. This was not the broken creature who had stumbled onto Ridgeback Ranch 3 weeks ago. This was someone else. Someone harder. Someone ready. Jacob tried to stand when she came into the main room, but the wound in his arm made him wince and sit back down. Clara crossed to him immediately. You should stay here, she said. You have lost too much blood. I am going. His voice left no room for argument. If Vernon is there, I need to be there. Jacob, you can barely stand. Then I will lean on something. He met her eyes and she saw the same steel she felt in her own spine. I made a promise to protect you. I am not breaking it now. Clara wanted to argue. She wanted to insist he rest, that he let others fight this battle. But she knew it would be useless. Jacob Mercer was not a man who stayed behind while others faced danger. At least let Tommy help you, she said finally. Jacob nodded slowly. The boy has earned that. Tommy stood near the door, already dressed in his cleanest clothes, his young face set with determination. He had not slept well. None of them had. But there was something different about him this morning, a readiness that had not been there before. "I will help," Tommy said. "Whatever you need." Jacob extended his good hand. "Then help me up. We have a battle to fight." They loaded into the wagon just as the sun crested the eastern hills. Clara drove with Jacob beside her, pale but upright. In the back, Martha and Rebecca sat close together, drawing strength from each other's presence. Marcus rode alongside on horseback, his face tight with the knowledge of what he was about to do. Danny and Lily stayed at the ranch with strict instructions to hide in the cellar if anyone came. Clara had wanted to bring them to keep them close, but Jacob had convinced her otherwise. "If things go wrong," he had said, "they need to be somewhere safe, somewhere they can run." It was the right decision. Clara knew that. But leaving them behind felt like tearing out a piece of her own heart. The town of Thornfield was already buzzing when they arrived. Word had spread overnight that something was happening at the church. Something important. People lined the wooden sidewalks, whispering to each other, craning their necks to see who was arriving. Reverend Samuel Holbrook stood at the church doors, his weathered face grave but welcoming. He was a tall man with white hair and kind eyes that had seen too much suffering to be shocked by anything. "Mrs. Whitmore," he took Clara's hands in both of his. "I received your message. The church is open to you." "Thank you, Reverend." Clara squeezed his hands. "I know this is unusual." "Truth is never unusual. It is simply rare." He stepped aside to let them enter. "Come, tell your story." The church was small but full. Farmers and shopkeepers, wives and widows, children and elders. They filled the pews and lined the walls, drawn by curiosity and the promise of drama. Clara saw faces she recognized from her brief time in town and faces she had never seen. All of them watching, all of them waiting. Sheriff Randall Burke stood near the front, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He was a man in his 50s with a reputation for fairness, but also for caution. He would not act without proof. He would not move against a man like Vernon Whitmore on the word of a runaway wife. Clara would have to give him more than words. She walked to the front of the church, feeling every eye upon her. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Her palms were slick with sweat, but her voice when she spoke was steady. "My name is Clara Whitmore," she began. "3 weeks ago, I fled from my husband Vernon with my 3 children. I ran because, if I stayed, he would have killed us." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Clara pressed on. "For 10 years I endured his cruelty. He beat me when dinner was cold. He beat me when I spoke out of turn. He beat me when I did nothing at all, simply because he enjoyed it." She told them everything. The broken bones, the threats, the night Vernon threw their youngest son against a wall, hard enough to leave a bruise that still had not fully healed. She spoke without tears, without pleading, simply stating facts as if reading from a ledger. When she finished, the church was silent. Then Martha stood. "My name is Martha Jennings." Her voice trembled, but she did not stop. "5 years ago, Vernon Whitmore courted me. He told me his wife was dead. When I discovered he was lying, I tried to end things. He broke 3 of my ribs and told me if I ever spoke of him again, he would kill me." She pulled back her sleeve, revealing scars that had faded but not disappeared. "I believed him," Martha said. "I have been afraid ever since. But I am done being afraid." Rebecca was next. She stood slowly, her face pale, her hands clenched at her sides. "My name is Rebecca Foster. Vernon Whitmore had an affair with me for 2 years. When I tried to end it, he threatened my family." Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to continue. "My daughter Amy found evidence of his crimes. She was 14 years old. Vernon pushed her down the stairs to silence her. The sheriff ruled it an accident. It was not an accident. It was murder." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. The crowd erupted. Shouts of disbelief, cries of outraged, voices raised in anger and confusion. Sheriff Burke called for order. His hand raised, his face troubled. "These are serious accusations," he said when the noise subsided. "Do you have proof?" Marcus stepped forward. The crowd parted around him like water around a stone. They knew who he was. They knew whose brother he was. And they watched with hungry eyes as he walked to the front of the church. "I am Marcus Whitmore," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Vernon is my brother, and everything these women have said is true." The silence that followed was absolute. I watched him hurt Clara. For years, I watched and did nothing. Marcus's hands shook as he pulled papers from his coat. I was there the night Amy Foster died. I saw Vernon push her. I heard her scream as she fell, and I said nothing. I told myself it was not my business. I told myself there was nothing I could do. He held out the papers to Sheriff Burke. These are my sworn statements. Names, dates, locations. Everything I witnessed over the past decade. Everything my brother did while I stood by and let it happen. Burke took the papers slowly, his eyes scanning the contents. Why are you doing this? He asked. He is your blood. Marcus looked at Clara, then at the crowd of people watching him with a mixture of contempt and curiosity. Because I am tired of being a coward, he said simply. Because I looked into the eyes of a little girl who stopped speaking, and I remembered another little girl who stopped speaking right before she died. Because some debts can only be paid with truth. Sheriff Burke studied the papers for a long moment. Then he looked up at Clara. Mrs. Whitmore, I need to ask you some questions about... The church doors slammed open. Vernon Whitmore strode in like a king entering his throne room. He was exactly as Clara remembered. Tall and handsome with the easy confidence of a man who had never been denied anything. His clothes were expensive, his boots polished, his smile warm and welcoming. The smile of a predator wearing human skin. Well, Vernon's voice carried easily through the silent church. This is quite a gathering. Clara felt her blood turn to ice. Her body screamed at her to run, to hide, to make herself small and invisible the way she had learned to do over 10 years of marriage. But she forced herself to stand still, to meet his eyes. Hello, Vernon, she said. His smile widened. Hello, Ruth. You have caused quite a bit of trouble. My name is Clara. Of course it is. He walked down the aisle, nodding to townspeople on either side, as if this were a social call. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for my wife's behavior. She has been unwell since the death of our youngest child last summer. Grief has affected her mind. We did not lose a child. Clara's voice was sharp. You threw Danny against a wall hard enough to crack his skull. Vernon's smile did not waver. You see delusions. It is tragic, really. I have tried to get her help, but she insists on running away, taking our children with her, spreading lies about me. They are not lies, Martha spoke up, her voice stronger than before. I have scars that prove otherwise. Vernon turned to look at her, and for just a moment, something cold flickered in his eyes. Martha, his voice was silky, I wondered what had happened to you. Still telling stories, I see. Still breaking bones, I see. The crowd murmured. Vernon's mask slipped slightly before sliding back into place. Sheriff Burke. Vernon turned to the lawman with an expression of patient suffering. I have a warrant for my wife's arrest. She kidnapped our children and fled across state lines. I am simply here to bring my family home. Burke held up the warrant, studying it. This was issued by Judge Howard Crane in Kansas, a respected member of the judiciary. A man currently under investigation for accepting bribes. Vernon's smile froze. Burke set the warrant aside. I contacted the Kansas authorities this morning. Judge Crane's rulings are being reviewed. Until that review is complete, this warrant is not valid in my jurisdiction. This is outrageous, Vernon's voice hardened. I have rights. Those are my children. Those children have rights too. Clara stepped forward, placing herself between Vernon and the door. The right to live without fear. The right to sleep through the night without wondering if their father will hurt them. The right to grow up whole instead of broken. Vernon's mask cracked completely. For just a moment, Clara saw the real man beneath. The cold rage, the calculating cruelty, the absolute certainty that he was entitled to anything he wanted. You ungrateful bitch. The words slipped out before he could stop them. I gave you everything. A home, children, a name, and this is how you repay me. You gave me bruises. Clara replied calmly. You gave me broken bones. You gave me 10 years of terror. I owe you nothing. Vernon's hand shot out and grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to leave marks. Jacob moved. Despite his wound, despite his weakness, he crossed the distance between them in 2 strides. His good hand closed around Vernon's wrist with crushing force. Let her go. Jacob's voice was quiet, deadly. Vernon released Clara, immediately stepping back, his face twisting with fury. Who the hell are you? The man who is going to put you in the ground if you touch her again. For a moment, the two men faced each other. Vernon polished and wealthy and accustomed to getting his way. Jacob wounded and weathered and absolutely willing to die. Vernon broke first. He stepped back, straightening his coat, forcing his mask back into place. Sheriff, I want this man arrested for assault. Burke did not move. I did not see any assault. I saw a man defending a woman from unwanted contact. This is absurd, Vernon's voice rose. You demand nothing, Burke cut him off. You are in my town now, Mr. Whitmore, and in my town we hear all sides before making judgments. He turned to the crowd. Anyone else have something to say about this man? Silence. Then from the back of the church, a new voice spoke. I do. Every head turned. A young woman stood in the doorway. She was perhaps 25, with fair hair and fine features, and the kind of beauty that drew eyes wherever she went. But her face was pale, and on her cheek a fresh bruise was beginning to purple. My name is Eleanor Price, she said, her voice shaking but clear. I am Vernon Whitmore's fiancée. Or I was until last night. Vernon's face went white. Eleanor walked down the aisle, her steps steady despite her trembling hands. He told me his wife was dead, she said. He told me she had died of fever, leaving him alone with 3 children who needed a mother. I believed him. I loved him. She stopped in front of Vernon, looking up at him with eyes full of shattered trust. Then I started asking questions about the bruises on the children when he came home from visits, about the woman in Kansas he sent money to every month, about the rumors I heard from servants who had worked for his family. Vernon reached for her. Eleanor, sweetheart, let me explain. She stepped back out of his reach. Last night I confronted him. Eleanor pulled back her sleeve, revealing more bruises. This is his explanation. The crowd erupted again. Sheriff Burke had to shout for order. In the chaos, Clara found Eleanor's eyes and nodded, a silent acknowledgement between women who had learned the same lessons in different classrooms. Vernon was cornered now. His allies were gone. His lies exposed his carefully constructed facade crumbling around him. Clara could see panic starting to edge into his expression. A cornered animal was dangerous. This is a conspiracy. Vernon's voice rose above the noise. You have all been turned against me by a hysterical woman and her lies. I will not stand for this. I will. He lunged, not for Clara, not for Jacob, for the door, specifically for Tommy, who had slipped inside during the commotion and was standing just inside the entrance. Vernon grabbed the boy before anyone could react, wrapping one arm around Tommy's throat, the other pulling a pistol from inside his coat. Nobody move. Vernon's voice was steady now, cold. This is my son. I am taking him home. Clara felt the world narrow to a single point. Her son, her child, in the hands of the monster she had fled. Vernon, please. Her voice came out as a whisper. He is just a boy. He is my property. Vernon pressed the gun against Tommy's temple. Just like you were. Just like the others were. Everything I have I own, and no one takes what is mine. Tommy did not struggle. He stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed on his mother, his face pale but calm. It is okay, Mama, he said quietly. I am not afraid. Clara's heart shattered. Take me instead. The words tore from her throat. Let him go and take me. I will come willingly. I will not fight. Just please, please let my son go. Vernon laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. You finally learned. He shoved Tommy aside and grabbed Clara's arm, pulling her close. Should have done this years ago. Made you watch me hurt them until you begged. He never finished the sentence. Eleanor moved. The heavy brass candlestick she had grabbed from the altar caught Vernon squarely on the back of the head. He staggered, releasing Clara, his gun hand wavering. Jacob tackled him. They went down together, crashing into pews, scattering hymnals. Vernon's gun discharged into the ceiling, sending plaster raining down. Jacob's wounded arm screamed in protest, but he did not let go. He pinned Vernon to the floor with his good hand around the man's throat. I should kill you. Jacob's voice was barely human. I should crush your windpipe and watch you die. Vernon clawed at Jacob's grip, his face turning red, then purple. Jacob. Clara's hand touched his shoulder. Jacob, stop. He deserves it. I know. But my children need you alive. I need you alive. Please. For a terrible moment, Clara thought he would not listen. She saw the killing rage in his eyes, the accumulated fury of a man who had lost everything once and nearly lost everything again. Then slowly his grip loosened. Vernon gasped for air, coughing and retching. Sheriff Burke moved in with handcuffs. Vernon Whitmore, you are under arrest for assault, making threats and suspicion of murder. Burke hauled the man to his feet. We will sort out the rest later. Vernon's eyes found Clara as the deputies dragged him toward the door. This is not over, he spat. I will never stop. I will find you. I will... The church doors closed behind him, cutting off his threats. Clara stood in the sudden silence, her legs trembling, her heart pounding. Then Tommy was there, throwing his arms around her, burying his face in her dress. I knew you would save me, he whispered. I knew. Clara held her son and wept. The trial was held 3 weeks later in the county seat. A proper judge presided. A jury of 12 men listened. Witnesses were called, evidence presented, arguments made. Clara testified first, then Martha, then Rebecca, then Eleanor, then Marcus. Each story was different. Each story was the same. A pattern of violence and control and absolute disregard for the humanity of others. But the moment that changed everything came on the third day of testimony. The prosecution called their final witness. The court calls Lily Whitmore. Clara's heart stopped. She had not known Lily was on the witness list. She had not even known Lily was in the building. But there she was, walking down the aisle of the courtroom, 7 years old and small as a sparrow, her eyes fixed on the judge. Your Honor. Clara rose. My daughter has not spoken in over a month. She cannot. Let her try. The judge's voice was gentle but firm. If she cannot speak, we will excuse her. Lily climbed into the witness chair. She looked so tiny there, her feet dangling above the floor, her hands folded in her lap. The prosecutor approached carefully. Lily, do you understand why you are here? Silence. Do you know the difference between the truth and a lie? Silence. Clara's heart ached. This was too much, too cruel. Her daughter should not have to face this. Your Honor, I must object. Mama. The word cut through the courtroom like a bell. Clara froze. Lily was looking at her. And for the first time in 5 weeks, her daughter's eyes were not empty. I want to tell them, Lily said. Her voice was rusty from disuse, barely above a whisper. But it was her voice. I want to tell them what I saw. Clara sank back into her seat, tears streaming down her face. The prosecutor knelt beside the witness chair. What did you see, Lily? I saw Daddy hurt Mama. The words came slowly, each one costing something. I saw him hit her. I saw him kick her. I saw him throw Danny against the wall. Did you hear your father say anything? Lily nodded. He said he would kill Mama if she ever left. He said he would kill all of us. She turned and looked directly at Vernon, who sat at the defendant's table with his expensive lawyer. I was scared to talk, Lily said. I was scared he would hurt me too, but I am not scared anymore. Vernon's face was ashen. Because Mr. Jacob promised to protect us. Lily continued, and he kept his promise. Even when the bad men came, even when he got hurt, he never left us. The courtroom was utterly silent. I want to go home now, Lily said to the judge, with my mama and my brothers and Mr. Jacob. I want to go home and never be scared again. The judge's eyes were suspiciously bright. Thank you, Lily, he said softly. You may step down. Clara gathered her daughter in her arms and held her as if she would never let go. The verdict came the next day. Guilty, on all counts. Assault, guilty. Battery, guilty. Making terroristic threats, guilty. Murder in the 2nd degree for the death of Amy Foster. Guilty. The sentence was life imprisonment without possibility of parole. As the bailiffs led Vernon away, he turned back one last time. His eyes found Clara's across the crowded courtroom. I will find you, he mouthed. Someday. Clara stood tall. No, she said quietly. You will die in prison, and I will live. Finally, truly live. The doors closed behind him. And just like that, 10 years of terror came to an end. They returned to Ridgeback Ranch as spring began to thaw the frozen ground. The snow was melting. The creek ran high with meltwater. The first green shoots were pushing up through the mud, reaching for the sun. Clara stood on the porch watching her children play in the yard. Danny chased a chicken that had escaped from the coop. Tommy practiced roping a fence post with a lasso Jacob had made him. Lily sat on the porch steps drawing pictures in a small notebook Clara had bought her in town. Drawing pictures and humming to herself. The sound of Lily's voice, even without words, was the sweetest music Clara had ever heard. Jacob came to stand beside her. His arm was still in a sling, healing slowly, but the color had returned to his face. He looked younger somehow, less burdened. "They are happy," he said. "They are safe." Clara replied, "That is all I ever wanted. What about you?" She turned to look at him, this man who had taken them in, who had fought for them, who had nearly died protecting children who were not his own. "What about me?" Jacob was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "You do not have to stay," he said finally. "The danger is past. You could start over somewhere else. Build a new life without," he gestured vaguely, "without being tied to this place. To me." Clara studied his face. The lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair, the wounds visible and invisible that mapped the terrain of his suffering. "Do you want me to go?" "No." The word came out rough, raw. "But I want you to have the choice. I want you to know that whatever you decide, I will support it." Clara reached out and took his hand. His fingers curled around hers, rough and warm. "I have spent 10 years with a man who never gave me choices," she said, "who told me what to think and feel and want. I will not make that mistake again." Well, Jacob's face tightened. "But here's what I choose." Clara continued, "I choose this ranch, these hills, this life. I choose to wake up every morning to the smell of coffee and wood smoke. I choose to watch my children grow up without fear. I choose safety and peace and the chance to become whoever I am meant to be." She stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. "And I choose you, Jacob Mercer, if you will have me." For a long moment he did not speak. His eyes searched her face, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that she was not certain. He found none. "I am a broken man," he said quietly. "I have ghosts that wake me in the night. I have done things I am not proud of. I do not know if I can be what you need." "I am a broken woman," Claire replied. "I have nightmares and scars and a decade of damage that may never fully heal. But I am learning that broken things can be mended. And sometimes two broken pieces fit together better than two whole ones." Jacob's hand came up to cup her face. His touch was gentle, reverent, as if she were something precious that might shatter. "Margaret told me something once," he said. "Before she died, she said not to close my heart. She said to find someone to love again." "And did you?" He smiled. It was a small smile, uncertain but real. "I think I am starting to." He kissed her, then soft and slow, a promise more than a passion. Clara leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. Behind them, Danny whooped as he finally caught the chicken. Tommy laughed at his brother's triumphant dance. Lily looked up from her drawing and smiled. When Clara and Jacob finally broke apart, they found 3 children, watching them with varying expressions. "Does this mean Mr. Jacob is our pa now?" Danny asked. Jacob looked at Clara. She nodded. "If you want me to be," Jacob said. "I want," Danny declared immediately. Lily nodded solemnly. Tommy was quiet for a moment. Then he walked over to Jacob and extended his hand. "Thank you for keeping your promise," he said, "and for not giving up, even when it was hard." Jacob shook the boy's hand firmly. "Thank you for trusting me," he replied. "I know that was not easy." Tommy's lips quirked in something that was almost a smile. "You earned it." The wedding took place a month later in the yard of Ridgeback Ranch. It was a small ceremony. Reverend Holbrook officiated. Sheriff Burke attended along with Martha and Rebecca and Eleanor, women who had become more than allies. They had become sisters, bound not by blood, but by survival. Clara wore a dress of pale blue, the color of Montana sky. Jacob wore his best shirt and a look of quiet wonder, as if he could not quite believe this was happening. The children stood beside them. Danny bounced with barely contained excitement. Lily clutched a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked that morning. Tommy held the rings, his face solemn with the weight of responsibility. "Do you, Jacob Mercer, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Reverend Holbrook asked. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health until death do you part. I do. Jacob's voice was steady. His eyes never left Clara's face. And do you, Clara Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health until death do you part? Clara smiled. I do. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Reverend Holbrook closed his Bible. You may kiss the bride. Jacob kissed her softly and the small crowd cheered. That night, after the guests had gone and the children were asleep, Clara and Jacob stood on the porch watching the stars emerge one by one from the darkening sky. Do you think Margaret would approve? Clara asked. Jacob was quiet for a moment. I think she would, he said finally. She always wanted me to be happy. She never wanted her death to be my death too. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. Jacob's arm tightened around Clara's shoulders. So are you, in different ways, but equally remarkable. Clara leaned her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. What happens now? She asked. Now, Jacob pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Now we live. We raise the children. We work the land. We build something that lasts. That sounds wonderful. It will not be easy. There will be hard times, setbacks, struggles. I know. Clara looked up at him. But we will face them together. That is the difference. Jacob smiled. It was the fullest smile she had ever seen on his face, transforming his weathered features into something almost young. Together, he agreed. I like the sound of that. They stood there for a long time watching the stars wheel overhead, listening to the night sounds of the ranch they had built into a home. Inside, 3 children slept peacefully in their beds. No nightmares, no fear, just the deep, dreamless sleep of those who know they are safe. And in the yard, the first flowers of spring were beginning to bloom. Yellow and purple and white, pushing up through the soil where blood had been spilled and tears had fallen. Life rising from the ashes of pain. Hope growing from the seeds of despair. Love found in the most unexpected of places. Clara Whitmore, who had once been Ruth, who had once been nothing more than a man's possession, was finally free, finally whole, finally home. And that she thought as she closed her eyes and breathed in the sweet night air was the greatest miracle of all. The winter had been long and hard, but spring had come at last, and with it a new beginning. Years later, people in Thornfield would tell the story. They would speak of the desperate woman who arrived in a broken wagon with 3 frightened children. They would speak of the rancher who took them in, who fought for them, who nearly died protecting them. They would speak of the trial that brought a monster to justice and the little girl who found her voice when it mattered most. But mostly they would speak of what came after. How Clara Mercer became the heart of Ridgeback Ranch. Her kitchen always warm, her door always open to those in need. How Jacob Mercer learned to smile again, to laugh again, to live as more than a ghost haunting his own memories. How Tommy grew into a man of quiet strength and unshakable integrity, the kind of man others look to in times of trouble. How Danny became a horseman of legendary skill, his gentle hands able to calm the wildest Mustang. How Lily, the girl who stopped speaking, became a teacher who helped other wounded children find their voices. The ranch prospered. The family grew. Children were born, grandchildren, after them each generation adding new chapters to the story that began with a desperate mother and a lonely man and a winter that should have killed them all. On the mantel above the fireplace, 2 photographs stood side by side. One showed Margaret and Sarah captured forever in a moment of happiness before the fire took them. The other showed Clara and Jacob on their wedding day, surrounded by 3 children who had found their way through darkness into light, past and present, loss and love. The people who shaped Jacob into who he was, and the people who gave him a reason to keep becoming. Clara understood this now. She understood that loving Jacob did not mean erasing Margaret, just as loving her new life did not mean denying the pain of the old one. They were both part of her story, both part of who she had become. And who she had become was someone remarkable. A survivor, a fighter, a mother, a wife, a woman who had walked through fire and emerged not unscathed but unbroken. On the last page of her journal, which she had kept faithfully since arriving at Ridgeback Ranch, Clara wrote, I came here looking for one winter, a place to hide, a chance to catch my breath before running again. I found something else entirely. I found a man who showed me that not all strength is loud, that some men protect with their presence, not their fists, that love can be quiet and steady and sure. I found children who taught me that healing is not a destination, but a journey. That broken things can grow strong in the broken places. That silence is not always emptiness, but sometimes a space where courage gathers before it speaks. I found myself, the woman I was before Vernon, the woman I was meant to be all along. And I found home, not a place but a feeling. The feeling of belonging to someone and somewhere. The feeling of being seen and valued and loved. The feeling of waking up without fear and falling asleep without dread. I thought I was asking for one winter. I was really asking for the rest of my life. And against all odds, that is exactly what I received. She closed the journal and looked out the window at the ranch she had helped build, at the man working in the barn, at the children playing in the yard, her family, her home, her life. The little girl who was called worthless became the woman who showed hundreds of others their worth. The mother who ran in desperation became the foundation of a dynasty. The wife who was beaten down rose to heights she had never imagined. And the rancher who had given up on happiness found it again in the most unexpected of places. This is how their story ended. Not with tragedy or tears, but with the simple, profound miracle of ordinary days lived in peace. The sun was setting over Ridgeback Ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. In the kitchen, dinner was warming on the stove. In the yard, children's laughter rang out like bells. And on the porch, a man and woman sat together, watching the light fade, knowing that whatever challenges came, they had the strength to meet them. Because they had each other. And sometimes that was all anyone needed. Home. Real home. The kind that lasted forever. Clara leaned her head against Jacob's shoulder and smiled. She was not rescued like a princess in a fairy tale. She was welcomed as an equal. And she welcomed back with her whole heart. That made all the difference.